a friend of mine recently left the church. In her graduation statement on a social media post, she credited such and such a BYU program and its faculty with the radicalization of her attitudes and the destruction of her faith.
So yesterday, Elder Holland gave a speech at BYU. If you have followed this channel, you know that there's a lot that's going on at BYU in terms of flashpoints, for example, of the family proclamation and other ideologies, those that may not stand hand in hand with the principles of the gospel. And this is what Elder Holland spoke about. And it's not a surprise that he brings this up. There are problems. There is trouble in Zion's school, so to speak. He's obviously aware of these issues and addresses them directly. Elder Holland is a tower of a man, and this was a mammoth speech. And so all I'm doing here, keep in mind, is just giving my opinion and a little bit of feedback from my ear being to the ground on a lot of these issues. As I move forward on this, keep in mind, you may not know that Elder Holland is the chairman of the executive committee over the Church Board of Education and Board of Trustees. So he is the man, outside of the prophet, obviously, he is the man that is in charge of BYU. As Elder Holland becomes very direct here in his talk, he reads a few lines from a letter that was sent to him from a woman.
You should know, the writer says, that some people in the extended community are feeling abandoned and betrayed at BYU or by BYU. It seems that some professors, at least the vocal ones in the media, are supporting ideas that many of us feel are contradictory to gospel principles, making it appear to be about like any other university our sons and daughters could have attended. Several parents have said they no longer want to send their children here or donate to the school.
So I think there's a real issue here. I think he brings this up specifically because it is a real issue. I think there are several parents, this is what I hear directly from those parents, that are wondering, is this where I should send my kid? Or should I send my kid to BYU? I mean, again, you imagine that you've built up your child in the church, 18 years, they go out into the world, they go to the church-sponsored university, and then sometimes immediately, everything that you've taught them is undermined by certain professors and others. Now, that doesn't mean that it is an overwhelming problem at BYU. That's not what I'm saying, but it is a significant issue. It is happening. The other thing that was said in the letter is that it's trying to be like every other university. That is what many people inside of BYU are trying to do. They are bringing in academia in a sense of all of its ideologies, all of its belief systems, all of its pedagogy. That's the way it teaches, what it teaches. It's very difficult to parse this out. It's very, very difficult to keep that separated.
But I would hope that BYU professors would be bridging those gaps between faith and intellect, and would be sending out students that are ready to do the same.
I think that this is one of the keys that's going to allow BYU to move forward, if possible. And that's the bridging of the gap. You have this dance between revelation and reason. You want both. We want as much learning as possible. But when you start to subvert gospel principles under the values of what academia is adopting these days, you've got a real problem. You are trying to filter the gospel now through an academic lens instead of the other way around. So you've got an inversion of a values hierarchy that is happening in some places at BYU. It is, as one professor said, Athens versus Jerusalem, or I would usually refer to Alexandria versus Jerusalem. Then we talk about the fruits of what happens when you invert these two sides, when you make academia your God and not the gospel. And this is heartbreaking, but it happens, and it happens at BYU.
After having served a full-time mission, and marrying her husband in the temple, a friend of mine recently left the church. In her graduation statement on a social media post, she credited such and such a BYU program and its faculty with the radicalization of her attitudes and the destruction of her faith.
Okay. Now, when you know this is coming directly from Elder Holland, right, then if you have watched some of the things that I have been saying here on this podcast, then you now know that if there was any doubt in your mind that this happens, you know that it happens. And I think it's really important to understand his words here. He's not saying that there was just some kind of doubt that was placed in with a student here. No, there was radicalization that was occurring. And that's what this is. This ideology, you've heard me talk a lot about critical race theory or critical social justice or postmodern critical theory overall, is the ideology, the hydra that academia has adopted. And within that ideology is a pedagogy. And what that pedagogy is a manner of teaching. It's how you're taught. And that pedagogy includes changing the way you think about things, breaking things down. It includes an indoctrination of knowledge. And thirdly, and most dangerously, it includes activating people into that political ideology. That is a part of it. It is not separate. It cannot be separate. This ideology includes praxis or activism. It is a conversion, a complete conversion of your heart and your mind and your behavior over to the ideology. Now, one thing I want to say is, because I'm cutting up this incredible speech, please, I'm putting the link into this. Go watch it. If you have a choice between watching him and watching or listening to this program, go watch or listen to him, because it is a fabulous, fabulous speech. But I want you to keep in mind that he is struggling through this with his love for BYU and for the gospel. It is very heartfelt. It is very emotional for him. And it is obvious to me that the brethren have a great concern over this, how they're going to handle this, and what things mean going forward in terms of how do you handle following the mission of BYU. Now, one thing some of you have brought up is, are my tithing dollars going to BYU? The answer here is yes, they do. Some tithing dollars go to BYU, as he's about to state here. And he's going to address this right now.
That if we're an extension of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and take a significant amount of sacred tithes and other human precious resources, all of which might well be expended in other worthy causes, surely our integrity demands that our lives be absolutely consistent with and characteristic of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ.
Okay, so for those of you who wonder, again, do they know what's going on? Do they do, all right? Give them some room to work through this. It might be an impossible task. It really might be an impossible task in the future. As these ideologies take over academia, how do you fit in? And there are those who are going to naturally, you might do it too if you were in academia at BYU, you are naturally going to want to stick with those ideologies and make BYU more like the rest of the academic world. That's going to be a natural thing for people to do. They're brought up in academia. They're brought up with these teachings. They're brought up with these ideologies. They're pernicious. But as they come into BYU, they're going to naturally try and create the same environment that they have come out of. So how do you move forward? What is the guiding principle here? We can look at the gospel principles, but people can manipulate that. They can change that. Jesus said this, or I can pull this quote and that quote, etc. What do we do? He gives us the answer to that.
At a university, there will always be a healthy debate regarding a whole syllabus full of issues. But until we all come to the unity of the faith and have grown to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, our next best achievement will be to stay in harmony with the Lord's anointed.
So that's the answer. And that includes modern day revelation. That includes the policies and principles that the Lord's anointed are going to put forward. Now, that's where the enemies, and there are many enemies, trust me, to what Elder Holland is saying here. There are many enemies that are going to go against that. That becomes the guiding line. That becomes the line in the sand to me. Is, are you going to follow the Lord's anointed? Are you going to follow those that are trying to lead this? Or are you going to fight against them? Are you going to follow the proclamations? Are you going to follow the conference talks? Are you going to listen to this talk that he's giving now and be humble enough to understand that you should follow through with what he is saying? For some, undoubtedly, the answer is yes. For many, it is no. I'll get to that toward the end here. So with that dividing line, what do? Well, I think that what he's doing here is he's going to ask people to stand up for the gospel and for the principles and for the Lord's anointed. That's what he's doing. That's what I've been trying to do with this podcast. There needs to be a bigger voice. Why? At BYU, is there not more of a thundering voice against these things? That is one of the greatest concerns there are, and I think that's why he addresses this. This is what he says. He goes back and he quotes Elder Oaks at the time, who is quoting Elder Maxwell about how to build a Zion University, so to speak, at BYU. This is interesting.
In a way, Latter-day Saint scholars at BYU and elsewhere are a little bit like the builders of the temple in Nauvoo, who worked with a trowel in one hand and a musket in the other. Today, scholars building the temple of learning must also pause on occasion to defend the kingdom. I personally think, Elder Maxwell went on to say, this is one of the reasons the Lord established and maintains this university. The dual role of builder and defender is unique and ongoing. I'm grateful we have scholars today who can handle, as it were, both trowel and musket. And Elder Oaks said challengingly, I'd like to hear a little more musket fire from the Temple of Learning.
Okay, so why would he bring that up, right? Why bringing this quote up here from originally Elder Maxwell and then from Elder Oaks, who emphasizes it, saying, I'd like to hear a little bit more musket fire? Well, because that's what they're looking for. Understanding the position of the church and how the media is always going to treat them, how academia is going to treat them, they need stronger voices at BYU that are going to fight against this radicalization, that are going to fight against the proclamations, that are going to fight against gospel principles, that are going to fight against the family. Because that is exactly what they are doing. They won't agree to that, but it's exactly to what they're doing. More musket fire from those at BYU. Now, he goes on to quote Elder Oaks in his address to BYU several years ago, and he uses the example of the family. And of course, Elder Oaks used the example of the family and the doctrine of the family because it's the biggest flashpoint. It's the biggest problem. That is not a surprise, because what has come up through academia is an all-out assault on the traditional family from every possible angle, and it is coming primarily, firstly, through the academy.
He said this in a way that could have applied to a host of topics in various departments, but the one he specifically mentioned was the doctrine of the family and defending marriage as the union of a man and a woman. Little did he know that while many would hear his appeal, especially the School of Family Life, who moved quickly and visibly to assist, some others fired their muskets all right, but unfortunately didn't always aim at those hostile to the church. We thought a couple of stray rounds even went north of the point of the mountain.
Okay. So, right, the same thing is going to happen with this speech. I hate to say it. I've already seen it. It's those who are ideologically opposed to Elder Holland's words are already circling the wagons against his comments here. They will fight hard. And there are many, many of those that are under that ideological influence that are at BYU, that feel that they have the high moral ground on their fight. And words from Elder Holland here are not going to change that. It may for some. Maybe there's some that soften their hearts a little bit. I hope so. But for many, many, understand that this ideology, because it's all-consuming, this critical social justice, it is like a religion. And Elder Holland's words here are simply rattling the hornet's nest. Now, he has gone through here in this talk painfully and emotionally, talking about how we need to love and support those with same-sex attraction, those that are of the LGBTQ community, and we need to accept them with open arms and love them, and that is the right thing. But he parses that out in saying that that doesn't mean that we agree with a specific lifestyle. And as he says here very, very clearly, and you have to learn to parse this out, people have same-sex attraction. People have gender issues. That is real. It is not fake. We need charity for those individuals. But we do not change the commandments of God. That is what he is saying. Marriage is between a man and a woman, and that is not going to change in the church. This is a place where there will be a rallying cry again for those that are fighting against Elder Holland's words. He talked about some rounds that were fired, but they seem to be inward. Of course they're inward. It's the same thing that's going to happen here after this talk. There will be fire, there will be musket fire from those that don't agree with Elder Holland at BYU, from within and without, and at Salt Lake, as he said, going north of the mountain. Now, he goes on to talk about how BYU needs to be uniquely committed to its mission, and that we can't allow academia and the ideologies of academia to supersede the mission of BYU or the principles of the gospel. I like what he says here about mimicking every other university.
It seems clear to me in my 73 years of loving it that BYU will become an educational Mount Everest only to the degree it embraces its uniqueness, its singularity. We could mimic every other university in this world until we get a bloody nose in the effort. And that world would still say, BYU who? No, we must have the will to be different, to stand alone if necessary, being a university second to none.
That is so true. No matter what BYU did in trying to be like their big brothers and sisters in the academic world, it will never accomplish that anyway. And that's not what the mission of BYU is to be like the rest of academia. We are to be separate. We're to be unique. We're to follow the mission of BYU. And why is BYU so important? Because, again, what happens, BYU is like, with all the youth there and all the new movements that you have there and the ideologies that are taught in academia as a whole, you've got this lab of connections and networks and ideas, good and bad, that are going to spill out into the church, just like from all of academia, it has spilled out into the culture and into religion. So what happens at BYU informs us as to what might happen in the church, or at least it educates us as to what may be coming. Now, finally here with Elder Holland, he talks about kind of an ultimatum for BYU in the future, perhaps. And I hope this is something that never happens. But as academia and the church have a greater and greater divide, the chasm is increasing at breakneck speed right now between the doctrines and the policies of the church and principles of the gospel, and on the other side of the chasm, the almost lockstep now approach to a worldview from the academy. I think it's very significant that he actually even mentions this.
If at a future time that mission means foregoing some professional affiliations and certifications, then so be it. There may come a day when the price we are asked to pay for such association is simply too high, too inconsistent with who we are. No one wants it to come to that, least of all me. But if it does, we will pursue our own destiny.
Okay. So he's very aware, right? And that's what some of you had questions about. Do they know what's going on? They are aware. They know what's happening. They know the course this is running down. They're aware of future problems. They're aware of the division, and that's what you need to first and foremost understand. They know there is a division, and they know it could lead to complete separation. They are trying to navigate these storms as best they can. Now, for many of you, you heard this talk and you thought, okay, this is great. He's really righted the ship, and of course the talk was absolutely incredible and very moving and stirring, very emotional. But this is going to be the same thing, unfortunately, that happened, I believe, and it's my opinion here, that happened with Elder Oak's talk, that happened with Elder Maxwell's talk. The muskets, for many, are going to turn inward, not outward. It's not going to be a defense of the church. It's not going to be a defense of the family. Already, there are musket shots out there publicly that are coming after Elder Holland. You're going to see them in the Salt Lake Tribune. You're going to see them in many different media venues. And of course, on social media, everywhere. So even though you watch this and you think, okay, well, this is such a feel-good thing and I'm so glad about it, you have to understand the ideological conversion of so many people that are going to take this as a challenge and as something that they have to break down. That is what is happening. They are circling the wagons. I've already seen several faculty members, professors, administration that I've seen online that have already said, how dare you, basically? How dare you do this? They have minced his words. They have stated that the muskets that he talked about were actually pointed toward LGBTQ members. Just preposterous things already that you're going to hear out there that are not true. Because he said that marriage is between a man and a woman, that's going to be a problem. Apparently, the church is not going to acquiesce. And there are a lot of people that don't like that. Do not be surprised if you see a manifestation against his words here of a protest or of some type of statement or something within BYU, something at Salt Lake. The chasm, unfortunately, is real. I wish it wasn't. But those that are against Elder Holland here, and there are many at BYU, are going to rally the troops, and they may come out even more bold in the school year here than what they would have without this talk. I'm not trying to be divisive. I'm not trying to create a greater chasm, but I'm not going to move on this. And he's not either, right? He's not. If he's not, I'm not. This is going to be an interesting year at BYU. From everything that I get, we'll call it intelligence that I'm receiving here, I think that there are going to be a lot of bold statements, a lot of bold moves, a lot of things happening this year where this ideology of postmodern critical theory is actually going to gain an even stronger voice. Make sure you go and listen to Elder Holland's entire talk so that you have all of the context of what he said. It is fabulous. very, very spiritual, emotional, moving talk with love and earnestness at its core. Thanks for listening.